The grand ballroom shimmered with gold and glass, the air filled with laughter and polite applause. Tonight was one of those glittering nights that only the rich could afford, chandeliers dripping light, waiters gliding like shadows, and the city's elite gathered to celebrate the engagement of Daniel Lennox, heir to the Lennox fortune. But amid the glitz and glamour sat one man who wasn't part of the noise, Arthur Lennox, Daniel's father. He sat at the head table, dignified, expression calm yet distant. Though his wealth could buy anything, there was one thing the billionaire had lived without all his life: sound. Born deaf, Arthur had mastered the art of silence. He communicated through sign language and lip reading, but at events like this, he often found himself surrounded by smiles and voices he couldn't truly share. Still, he loved his son deeply. Daniel had inherited his late mother's charm and his father's determination. But tonight, as Daniel's engagement was about to be formally announced, Arthur felt a quiet worry. He had never truly met the woman who'd captured his son's heart, Emma Carter, a schoolteacher from a modest background. And though he trusted his son's judgment, part of him feared she would see him only as the billionaire's deaf father, an obstacle to tolerate, not a man to know. When Daniel stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, his smile lit up the room. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice echoing across the ballroom. "Thank you for being here to celebrate with us. Tonight, I have the honor of introducing the woman who changed my life, Emma." The crowd turned as the grand doors opened. Emma walked in, her sapphire gown flowing gracefully. She wasn't dripping in diamonds like the others, yet somehow, she shone brighter. Her beauty was quiet, like sunrise rather than spotlight. As she approached Daniel, he took her hand gently, then led her toward his father. Arthur rose politely, his eyes studying her. She smiled warmly and mouthed, "It's a pleasure to meet you," so he could read her lips. But then, instead of speaking further, she raised her hands and began to sign. Arthur's breath caught, her hands moved smoothly, beautifully. The language of his world, his silence, flowed from hers like poetry. "It's an honor to finally meet you, Mr. Lennox. Daniel has told me so much about you. I'm very happy to be here." For a moment, Arthur couldn't move. The noise of the room faded. All he saw was this young woman speaking to him in the language of his heart. His vision blurred as emotion welled up, something deep, raw, and long buried. When he finally managed to sign back, his hands trembled. "You know sign language," Emma nodded, smiling softly. "Yes, my younger brother was born deaf. I learned when I was 12 so he would never feel left out." Arthur's throat tightened. No one had ever bothered to learn his language except his late wife, Daniel's mother. After she died, people spoke at him, never to him. But this woman, this stranger, had walked straight into his world without hesitation. He signed slowly, tears beginning to form. "My wife used to sign for me at parties like this. She didn't want me to feel invisible." Emma's hands moved gently, deliberately. "Then I'll do the same. You'll never be invisible to me, Mr. Lennox." The words, silent, yet louder than anything he had ever heard, broke him. Arthur stepped forward and took her hands. His eyes, always so composed, now glistened openly. Without caring who was watching, he pulled Emma into a trembling embrace. The guests stared, whispering, unsure what had just happened, but Daniel knew. His father's silence had just been broken by understanding. As Arthur let go, he signed something quickly, his motions urgent. Daniel laughed through tears as he interpreted for the room, "My father says, welcome to the family." Applause erupted, but Arthur barely noticed. He was still watching Emma, the woman who had somehow reached into the quietest part of his soul and made it feel alive again. Later that night, when most of the guests had gone, Emma found Arthur sitting by the grand piano in the corner of the ballroom. His hand rested on the polished wood, eyes distant. She walked up quietly and signed, "Do you play?" Arthur shook his head. "No, my wife used to. I can't hear it, but I can feel the vibrations. She said that was our way of sharing music." Emma smiled. "Would you like to feel it again?" He nodded. She sat beside him and began to play, slowly, softly, the same melody Daniel's mother used to love. The gentle notes filled the air, invisible waves of emotion. Arthur placed his palm on the piano and closed his eyes. Each vibration pulsed through his hand and into his chest, as if his wife's memory was breathing through the music. When she finished, he opened his eyes, and tears rolled freely down his cheeks. He signed with shaky hands. "You've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever." Emma replied, "You've given me something too, a family who listens even in silence. At that moment, Daniel appeared at the doorway, watching quietly. He had never seen his father so open, so full of feeling. Arthur noticed him and motioned for him to come closer. When Daniel did, Arthur took both his hands and Emma's, joining them together. Then he signed slowly, each word deliberate, heavy with love. "You didn't just choose the right woman, son. You chose the woman who brought music back into my world." Daniel's voice cracked as he translated, tears streaming down his face. Emma reached up, touching Arthur's cheek gently. "You'll never be alone in silence again," she signed. Arthur nodded, overwhelmed. For years, he had lived surrounded by sound he could not hear, people he could not truly reach. But tonight, in this moment, he felt everything. Not through words, not through music, but through love spoken in the purest language of all, understanding. The three of them stayed like that, hands joined, hearts open, while the lights of the ballroom flickered softly around them. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual noise, but inside that golden hall, silence had never felt so full. For the first time in decades, Arthur Lennox didn't feel deaf. He felt heard. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and gold. Laughter filled the air, music swirled through the crowd, and cameras flashed every few seconds. It was the engagement party of Daniel Lennox, heir to the Lennox Empire, one of the richest families in the country. At the head table sat Arthur Lennox, Daniel's father. Even in a room full of powerful people, his presence commanded quiet respect. Silver-haired, dignified, and impeccably dressed, he was the picture of success. But unlike the others, Arthur did not join the chatter or laughter. He simply watched, his world wrapped in silence. Arthur had been deaf since birth. Over the years, he'd learned to read lips, to nod politely when people spoke too fast, to smile when they forgot he couldn't hear. He had built a billion-dollar company without ever listening to a single meeting. Yet in moments like this, surrounded by voices he couldn't follow, he felt like an outsider in his own life. Tonight, Daniel was introducing his fiancée, Emma Carter. A schoolteacher, humble and kind-hearted, she was not from their world of limousines and private jets. Many in the crowd whispered that she was too ordinary for a Lennox. But Daniel only smiled. He had fallen in love with her heart, not her pedigree. As the orchestra faded, Daniel stepped up to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," he said, his voice warm and confident. "Thank you for joining us tonight. I'd like you all to meet the woman who changed my life, Emma." All heads turned as the doors opened. Emma walked in gracefully, wearing a simple sapphire gown that shimmered as she moved. Her beauty wasn't loud, it was soft, natural, effortless. The murmurs in the room died down. Even Arthur leaned forward, intrigued. When Emma reached the stage, Daniel took her hand and smiled proudly. "Dad," he said, looking at Arthur, "I'd like you to officially meet Emma." Arthur stood up, smiling politely. He'd met countless people who tried too hard to impress him. He expected another awkward handshake, a polite smile, maybe a few lip-read words he couldn't quite catch. But Emma didn't speak. Instead, she raised her hands, and began to sign. Her fingers moved gracefully, forming words Arthur had not seen from anyone outside his family in years. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Lennox. Daniel has told me so much about you. I've been looking forward to this moment." Arthur's expression froze. His breath caught. For a long moment, he could only stare, eyes wide, heart thundering. Then his hands began to move, unsteady at first. "You know sign language," Emma nodded, smiling gently. "Yes, my younger brother was born deaf. I learned when I was 12 so he would never feel left out." Arthur blinked back tears he hadn't expected. He hadn't felt this kind of connection with a stranger in decades. He signed back, his movements slow, emotional. "You remind me of my wife. She used to sign for me at every event like this. So I'd never feel invisible." Emma's smile softened. "Then I'll do the same. You'll never feel invisible around me." For the first time in years, Arthur's composure broke. Tears welled in his eyes as he stepped forward, ignoring the whispers around them. He took Emma's hands and pulled her into a trembling embrace. The room fell silent. No one needed to understand sign language to know what was happening. Daniel watched with tears in his own eyes. He had never seen his father cry since his mother passed away. Yet here he was, breaking down, not from grief, but from gratitude. In that crowded ballroom, the billionaire's deaf father finally heard something he hadn't in years, understanding. Part 2. Music without sound. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Lennox mansion. Arthur sat in the library, pretending to read the newspaper but thinking only of Emma. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her hands moving, clear, fluent, kind. She hadn't pitied him. She hadn't shouted or exaggerated her words like so many people did. She had simply spoken his language, and in doing so, reached his heart. When Emma entered the room, Arthur looked up immediately. She smiled and began signing before he could reach for his pen and paper. "Good morning, Mr. Lennox," he smiled. "Please, call me Arthur." She laughed softly. "All right, Arthur. Did you sleep well?" "Barely," he signed. "I was too busy feeling something I haven't felt in a long time, seen." They both smiled. For the next hour, they talked through their hands, about books, about her students, about Daniel's childhood. Arthur couldn't remember the last time a conversation felt so easy. When Daniel walked in later, he found them laughing silently, their hands dancing in midair. "I see I've been replaced," he joked. Arthur signed to Emma, "He talks too much anyway." She laughed and translated, "He says you talk too much." Daniel shook his head in mock offense, and Arthur's shoulders shook with silent laughter. The warmth in the room was contagious. The kind of laughter that didn't need sound to be felt. That evening, as the family gathered in the music room, Arthur found himself sitting by the grand piano, the one his late wife used to play. He hadn't touched it since she passed. The house had been full of silence ever since. Emma sat beside him and placed her hand gently on the piano. "Your wife played, didn't she?" She signed. Arthur nodded. "Every night. I couldn't hear her, but I could feel the vibrations. It was our way of sharing music." Emma thought for a moment, then smiled. "Would you like to feel it again?" Before he could respond, she began to play. Softly, tenderly, her fingers glided across the keys, filling the room with melody. Arthur closed his eyes and placed his palm flat against the piano. The vibrations pulsed through him, gentle, rhythmic, alive. He couldn't hear the notes, but he could feel their warmth, their heartbeat. And then he began to sign, slowly, as if